Hey, welcome back to Steve Horvath Outdoors. Today we're going to talk about the number one mistake that I see jig fishermen making. Now it's easy. What's the number one mistake? Not getting your jig down to where the fish are. When I say that, nobody's fishing a jig that floats, but a lot of times I see people fishing a jig that's much too light for the situation. Let's talk about pitching and flipping. About the lightest jig that I would use in pitching and flipping would be 3/8 of an ounce, up to 3/4 of an ounce. The sweet zone seems to be somewhere in that 1/2 to 5/8 range. It's a lot heavier than some people think, but it gets down quick, which causes a reaction bite, and make sure that you get through whatever cover you're pitching through. If you're using an Arky type head or a football type head, you're fishing deeper water, unless you're fishing super light line like 10 or 12 pound line, I would say start out with a 1/2 as your lightest jig and go toward more like 3/4 or even an ounce depending on the water depth. I'm going to demonstrate this point to you in the way of jig weight versus size by actually comparing a few. Now this jig is a 5/8 ounce jig, already trimmed the skirt, okay, with the trailer on it. Now let's look at some other jigs. Here's a finesse cut jig that's 5/16 of an ounce. You can see that although it has a smaller profile, really it's about the same length. How about this Arky style jig in a 1/2 ounce, something that I might use in open water? It's got a lighter hook. Again, virtually the same size, but it doesn't necessarily correlate to the weight of the jig. Let's take a look at this compact pitching jig. Again, virtually the same size. A pair of scissors is what changes size of a jig, not necessarily the weight of the jig. Last but not least, hand-tied rubber jig that weighs virtually the same as this pitching jig. So remember, it's the weight of the jig, not the relative size of the jig, that gets you down to the bottom and keeps you on the bottom. The last thing you want is to make a cast and think you're on the bottom, be picking up and getting that floating feeling because, well, the jig just isn't on the bottom, and then you have to let line out and get it back to the bottom. You want the jig to stay in contact with the bottom, well, unless you're fishing a swim jig, of course. Hey, for Steve Horvath's Fishing, I'm Steve. I'll catch you later.